It's the week ending Saturday, the 17th of November, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the UK and the EU agreeing a draft Brexit deal, the deadliest wildfires in California's history, and scientists voting to change the weight of the kilogram. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team are Cameron Tait, Jamie Timson, and from the Week Junior, Felicity Capon. And Felicity, you are starting the show this week. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
There will be blood, but can the vegan revolution bring home the bacon?
Tofu instead of beef. There's not a scrap of meat to be found at Dandy Diner, a completely vegan fast food restaurant set up by the fashion bloggers Jakob Haupt and David Roth. They refer to themselves as vegans for trend reasons.
You express yourself through your clothes and the brands you wear, but also through what you eat and what you don't eat. Veganism is huge these days. We recognised this early on. Now we're the vegan fast food kings.
A clip from DW English there, covering the subject of lucrative veganism. Felicity, what's the story?
The story this week is that a US plant-based meat company called Beyond Meat have finally hit the UK market. So 350 stores of Tesco will now be stocking their vegan burgers.
And these are the ones, aren't they, that caused a sensation online? Social media was very excited in America when they debuted there.
Yeah, because they're supposed to be just like meat, basically. They're made of pea protein and they contain beetroot juice, which is supposed to give a kind of bloody effect to it. And people absolutely rave about it and say it tastes just like meat, and you can now get it in Tesco's. A pack of 2 will cost you £5.50.
Okay, and as we record this,
yes,
Theresa May is presenting the Brexit deal to Parliament. By the time this comes out, she may not be Prime Minister anymore.
True.
And this is your story of the week. You can buy a vegan burger in Tesco. Explain why.
Because the podcast doesn't let me do the stories that are the really big ones of the week, Ollie.
Yeah, on the basis that there might be something going on, whilst we're all distracted by Brexit and other things, there might be important news happening we're not on top of. What's the real significance of this?
It is important. I think it is a turning point for the so-called vegan revolution. I think the idea that they are now hitting Tesco, and that the thing about it is that they're going to be sold alongside real meat products in the chilled aisle. I think that is a big deal. I don't think you've seen that before. So
I suspect, Jamie,
news.
Millennial correspondent, this will be the fault of your generation, won't it?
Most things usually are.
Yeah,
Ollie.
This trend that
What are you, Generation X? Are you a Gen Xer?
I'm like 1 year too old to be a millennial. I saw one definition once that had me as a millennial, and I was temporarily
That explains so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember life before computers, but basically understand them. Anyway, when you go to the supermarket, your lot, the younger ones, you're the people who say, okay, I'm a carnivore, but I am happy, in fact, keen to be vegan 2 or 3 nights a week.
Flexitarian, I believe.
Flexitarianism. That's the new thing, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that what is key and crucial about this product and story that Felicity has so wonderfully brought to us is that I think it is the first example of vegan products being aimed to be not only a cheap substitute or a substitute for meat, but actually a better version. They've said in their kind of promotional stuff that actually what they're attempting to do is to turn meat eaters towards them, not because, oh my God, this tastes exactly like beef, but actually because this tastes nice, this tastes better. And I would say it's akin to the electric car movement, looking at Cam, which has been a big push towards trying to persuade people to move from petrol to electric by actually saying that electric cars are better than petrol cars. And this was the same thing, is that it's veganism basically saying that not only is it great for the environment, it actually tastes great, looks great, feels great.
Yeah, I like it how they've actually made something that looks really quite appetizing. I am a meat eater. I am not a flexitarian or a vegetarian. But it looks like something that I would want to go out and buy, and I would be quite happy I could kind of feel like I've eaten something that is akin to a beef burger, knowing that I haven't slaughtered little cows.
Except this seems to me to have sprung out of American culture, Felicity, where people do eat a lot of burgers. And actually in the UK, I don't know how often, aside from summer barbecue season, I really make burgers at home. I kind of think actually when I'm making a burger, that's a treat. Like maybe it's once every 2 months that I'm making a burger at home. Do I really need a vegan version of that? Why don't I just get the tastier one and choose organic free-range meat? I mean, is there really a market for this here?
A huge market. I mean, Beyond Meat itself, it was launched in 2016. Its investors include Bill Gates, Tyson, which is a US leading meat producer, and Cleveland Avenue, a venture capital fund founded by the former McDonald's chief executive. The company's raised more than $140 million since its launch and is now valued at just over $500 million.
Okay,
it's huge money. And I think your point about burgers and whether we eat burgers in this country, it's not just burgers. I think you're seeing a whole range of products. If the clip we played at the beginning of this segment talks about the vegan movement in Germany, there are vegan hairdressers, there are vegan shoe shops. And I also think it's no longer the case that vegan food is kind of, you know, what hippies in sandals with long hair eating their like little pathetic lentils. It's now about unhealthy food. So the idea that you can eat vegan food which is unhealthy, burgers, vegan mac and cheese, vegan sweets, vegan chocolate, all the naughty stuff. You no longer have to be this self-righteous, health-conscious vegan. You can be a naughty vegan.
So let's follow that money then. Which came first? More people wanting to be vegan or the companies utilising veganism as a business venture?
That's a bit of a chicken and the egg question, isn't it?
Vegan chicken, vegan egg.
A vegan chicken and the egg. Vegan chicken and vegan egg question. I mean, I think you're seeing environmentalism impacting on business and corporations anyway. I think, you know, plastic bags and straws and all that sort of thing. I think businesses are having to think about that more generally. And I think that's really, really exciting. But I think the demand is there because it has become kind of trendy and fashionable, and you can have a sort of conscience about it at the same time. Like it's just a sort of win-win thing. And I think there is huge amounts of money to be made out of it. And
huge amounts of money that it costs to buy as well, Jamie. I mean, that's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know, if you're going to go and spend £5 on 2 burgers, that's a lot more than getting a hamburger from McDonald's.
Absolutely, but I think kind of sheer market capitalism will drive the price down of these products eventually. You know, the first ones to come into the market will be expensive, and then eventually as it becomes more widespread they will obviously drive the prices down. I think what's also interesting about, you know, what you were saying, you know, there is a huge business element to this drive and more money to be made for big companies. But I think that if you are vegan, or at least you are interested in flexitarianism or anything like that, you're less likely to choose perhaps one of the old meat producing companies, you know, like Walls for sausages or anything. You're less likely to choose their vegan option than you are to choose a new environmentally friendly company. And what's a new Canadian report was out recently saying that actually the vegan businesses that have come up growing these vegan products and selling them are actually much better in terms of labour practices, environmental standards, the way in which they go about producing and making this as a company is a lot better for the kind of for generally for workers and for people. And so I think that's where people are choosing to spend their money.
And why do you think, Cameron, it is that the tech companies, your Elon Musks and your Bill Gateses, are investing in this sort of thing?
Because the big kind of drive behind technology firms at the moment is sustainability. Look at Elon Musk. Everything that he does is about prolonging humanity's existence on planet Earth. That's why we have electric cars, to clean up the atmosphere, and also why he's firing rockets into space to try and find ways on Mars. And naturally, what comes after that is, it sounds strange saying it, but it really does make sense. It's veganism. The only thing I'm thinking about while saying that is, obviously, would be if everyone turns vegan, then we'd be kind of taking quite a lot of plant life, wouldn't we? Murdering a lot of plants.
There is also this idea about our pollution of soils. You know, there's a strain of veganism that's called the no-dig movement, which is about not disturbing the soils in the ground when you are producing these vegan products, because something like 70% of the carbon within the Earth's soil has now been released into the atmosphere because of the ploughing, excess ploughing that takes from things. And while veganism isn't a pure cause of that, it is also one of the causes for that.
Yeah, but don't make good the enemy of perfect. I mean, even flexitarianism, even trying to reduce your meat consumption is a good thing, and it's got to be baby steps. I think it's interesting, though, that it is ruffling huge feathers in the US beef industry in particular. They filed a petition to exclude non-animal products from even having the definition of meat. In France, there's a law banning vegetarian companies from calling their products sausages, mince or bacon. So it's obviously ruffling enough feathers that I think it will be very interesting. I think, you know, traditional meat eaters, this is going to be a real culture shock for them. And I think deep down they are going to be feeling very guilty about what they're doing.
It is processed food, though, isn't it? So whilst it might be good that you're not eating animal fat, and we know that red meat is something you should not be eating lots of, health-wise, generally, like if you have to boil down all the dietary advice from all the different scientists and nutritionists that tell us what we should and shouldn't put in our gobs, it does kind of come down to eat the fresh stuff, don't eat processed food. This is massively processed, deep frozen, chemically produced stuff.
Yeah, but as Felicity said, it's a step forward.
But is
it's
it?
better.
I mean, couldn't it
of course
actually
it is.
be less
Well, it's better than
isn't
processed meat, isn't it?
Is it? I mean, if you're eating just a pure 100% steak mince, isn't that better for you than a processed frozen food?
But you have to take in everything. You have to look at the environmental
Sure.
implications.
So that's what I'm saying.
You
So
have to look at
take in what I'm saying. What about the fact that maybe it isn't that good for you? And actually,
but it's so much better than eating red meat. That's
maybe
the point.
Maybe there's a goal at the end of it, which is that actually people don't eat processed food at all, and maybe that end goal is that we don't need these Beyond Meat burgers that are heavily processed and might indeed be worse for you than just eating a nice carrot. But and maybe we do want to move towards a stage where people are just eating very healthy, very fresh stuff. But if you're going to the shop and you're going to buy a burger, it's sure as hell better that you're buying this vegan burger than if you're buying a cheap Sainsbury's knockoff.
Horse meat and funky.
And at the end of the day, it's you've got to treat yourself sometime. You can't eat perfectly every single day for every meal. Even if it's just like you were saying earlier, you may have a burger once every 2 months. Then why not have a vegetarian one? A vegan one, sorry, not vegetarian.
Treat yourself.
Because that's not the treat, clearly. Although you've tried it, have you? And you
I
like
tried it. I went to Honest, which is the burger chain which was selling the Beyond Meat burgers, and I thought it was impressive. But I think I went in there wanting it to be good, and I think meat eaters probably going in there who are absolutely determined to hate veganism, which is a real thing, this absolute vitriol towards vegans. I think they're just never going to be impressed with it because they're never going to be open-minded. But if you go in there wanting to love it, I think it's a bloody impressive product.
But I think that's what's interesting about this move is that previously veganism had almost been portrayed as this kind of meat is murder. If you're eating meat, you're a murderer. Whereas this is kind of look, you can go and eat a burger, doesn't have any meat in. What do you think of it? It just seems a slightly more relaxed approach.
And it'll be a part of an education towards a new generation of people that are perhaps much more open to veganism in a less meat is murder kind of way.
Cameron, you're next. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
Is it time we beat violence out of sport?
Yeah, what happened with Max, clearly I came out of the box. The first lap I stayed behind. The second lap the team said, you can unlap yourself if you want. So I went around the outside, but clearly he didn't give me enough space. Max, I was side by side so I couldn't disappear, and then I saw he turned and we went to collision. But what I'm really surprised of is his behavior after the race. We went on the scale, started to punch me, wanted to punch me and stuff, and this is not professional.
That was Formula One driver Esteban Ocon discussing a run-in with Max Verstappen on Sunday. Cameron, what happened?
Well, we had quite a bizarre Brazilian Grand Prix on Sunday. You had Red Bull's Max Verstappen leading the race, and then about halfway through the race, you had Esteban Ocon in the Force India, about 2 laps down, but he was on fresher tyres and a little bit faster. So he wanted to get past the race leader.
So he could just be 1 lap down?
So he could just be 1 lap down, yes, which you're allowed to do. But in the process of trying to unlap himself, he went to go and overtake Max Verstappen and they collided, which was shocking in itself. But after the race, Max Verstappen was so furious that he went up to Esteban and then started shoving him. He got called up to by the FIA stewards and was accused of being violent, and has now got to do 2 days of community service.
What does that mean?
So they haven't actually said of what the community service is. People believe that it might be more he'll be educated about his aggression rather than helping people out. But
okay, so I saw this clip online, which, by the way, was pushed out by Formula One social media channels, so they were obviously quite happy to get the coverage from this.
It's dramatic.
And it looked to me rather like one of the pre-boxing match press conferences where the two boxers face up to each other and pretend to be angry. Well, was it real?
Yes, 100% real, and this is what I find so fascinating is that we really don't get this kind of thing in Formula One, and it was a little bit of pushing and shoving, and you had people on kind of the side of the fence saying this is very unprofessional, it's ridiculous, but then other people saying it's people showing their passion, it's great seeing the drivers really care about their sport, and it made me wonder, well, is this something that we see in other sports as well? And what I found out is there are some pretty considerable extremes out there. So if you take the NHL in America, for instance, the hockey league, there are actually rules that permit players to engage. It's relatively unofficial, but you'll have people that are part of a team where if there's a disagreement that goes on, you'll have a player called the enforcer that will go and wade in on the attack and help protect the skilled player, as they call it.
Felicity, do you think this is encouraging to see, sportsmen caring about their sport, or do you think it was a bit pathetic?
I think the fans probably love to see their players engaging in a bit of violence and seeing that they care so much and they're passionate about it. So I think, if you have a football team that you support and there's a bit of argy-bargy at the end, you're going to rush to their defence and say, and like the fact that they're getting so passionate about it. I think sport probably, when you boil it down, is inherently violent in some ways. I mean, athletes have to be aggressive. They are born winners. They get easily rattled. There's huge amounts of money involved. There's huge amounts of training. I think it must be a very thin line between what is permissible violence and if you take it all the way back to like the gladiators, I think sport is just a bloody violent thing. And I think, you look at the bad boys of tennis or whatever, John McEnroe or, Serena Williams getting all shouty. I think people do like that passion. I think we like our athletes to bring the drama. It did make me think of more sort of serious examples of how much sporting heroes are allowed to get away with. You could take it to extremes with Tonya Harding, which was a really interesting case. I
don't know if you'd call her a sporting hero, though. I mean,
I think she's had her reputations. She was fantastic. She was the first US ice skater to do the triple axel or whatever it's called. She was incredible, but the huge scandal was that her ex-boyfriend orchestrated an attack on her rival Nancy Kerrigan, which is an extreme violence in order to get her rival out of the way. What about O.J. Simpson? I mean, it's part of the reason OJ had so much support in the murder trial, because he was an incredibly successful athlete, the likes of which at the time no one had really seen. Is that why he had there's a whole race element as well, but he was an incredible athlete. I think a lot of people gave him a lot of slack for that.
Jamie?
I think that there's been a move away from any kind of forms of violence in sport in the past 20 years. I mean, so for instance, to pick up on ice hockey, the average number of fights in a game in 89-90 in the NHL, which is the biggest ice hockey league, it was 1.3 fights per game. The average last season was 0.25. Now, a lot of that has been down to the, in ice hockey particularly, the role of the enforcer has been taken back because people don't want to have violence on the field or on the ice, as it were. But also in other sports, a lot of criticisms in rugby about that is that a lot of the new rules that have been brought in around surrounding the tackle and about whether you can make contact with the head have taken some of the sport. You have just this past week people talking about how it's a contact sport and they're taking the contact out of the game. And there is a feeling that we do need to, for right or for wrong, protect our players much more. But whether or not that removes some of the enjoyment value for fans, I think is a question for people to ask. But I would say that, particularly with things like the NFL and probably even football, is that a lot of the time it's older fans saying, oh, it wasn't like this in my day, and the younger people are actually saying we're not that bothered about seeing like actual violence. I think there is a general feeling that it's not something that people want. We don't want to see people get really hurt.
Well, hold on, but they're not getting really hurt, are they? This is a bit of argy-bargy, this is a bit of push and shove.
Really. This was, about to say, in the grand scheme of things, what happened in Formula 1 really was just a little bit of pushing and shoving. It was.
And I wonder whether it always happened, but the cameras weren't there. I mean, I mentioned earlier the social media channels pushing this footage out. I mean, I used to watch Formula 1 in the 80s. There was the odd camera in the paddock, but it wasn't like now where everything's being filmed. This probably always happened.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that it happened in the 80s. And I mean, there are even famous shots of people actually beating each other up on track. I mean, there was one race in the 80s, I can't remember which year, of where Nelson Piquet tried to beat up one of the back markers who had taken him out actually on the circuit in front of one of the TV cameras. But that was 30 years ago. I think that's really what I got out of this, is that when it does happen, I mean, this is the first instance of violence, you could say, being shown on camera in Formula 1 for about 20 years. 20 years ago, it was kind of considered, good on them, they're letting out their frustration. And now it's kind of like, well,
and that's something
do you really need to do that?
All sports. But then, I mean, as a counterpoint, I feel slightly conflicted, because I think the rise of something like mixed martial arts and UFC proves that there is a lust for violence.
But that's fighting to win, isn't it? I mean, what's really weird about this is we already know who's won the championship this season for Formula 1. I mean, okay, yes, it was the person who was leading the race, but he was never going to win. He wasn't, it was a case of where he placed in the final list. He's never going to win.
Exactly. But I mean, I think any sports person would want to, if they're given a chance of winning, even if they don't have a championship under their belt, they're going to want to go and do it.
It's also that when you're on the track, you're in a car. And so it feels just unsportsmanlike to down tools and then have a fight. It's a bit different if you're in the heat of the moment, and at the very moment you're tackled, Felicity, you say, up yours, and give them a punch. You can justify that more, maybe, than afterwards. You've got out the car, you've thought about it, you've walked over there intending to punch the guy.
But think about road rage. You know, high speeds, you're in these cars, you're crashing around, the adrenaline must be fierce. If you feel like you've been seriously wronged, whether you're Formula One or just, you know, driving down the motorway, if someone seriously wrongs you, I think it's human nature to get absolutely enraged and carry it on. I just think it's human nature, basically. I think there's a lot of bottled up tension and frustration and anger, and if you feel like you've been seriously slighted, then it's gonna get all pushy and shovey. But equally, I think when there's huge amounts of money involved, I think there are sporting stars who do probably feel they can operate with total impunity and get away with, you know, near murder.
Yeah, but the only thing I would say in that is, yes, I think it's human nature, but I think it sets a bad example. I mean, the thing with sport is that it's watched by people of all ages. I remember the Zinedine Zidane incident in 2006.
That was great when he had butted.
Yeah, but everyone, I was at school at the time, and all of the kids, they would try and get away with headbutting other players because it's what Zidane did, and they knew it was wrong.
As a football fan, I think that I probably do want to see a level of desire and passion from the players. I think that's why I'm hypocritical, because I don't want to see them punch each other, but I do want to see them like scream and shout and say that they want to win, and to think that they can get themselves to that point and then pull themselves back. To think that Marco Materazzi can say that about Zinedine Zidane's sister and not expect repercussions is unfeasible from a fan perspective.
Again, I love that passion when it comes to it, and where they're. I remember in one race you had Daniel Ricciardo was knocked out of qualifying really early, and you could hear him screaming in his helmet, and I love that. But when you see them Max didn't beat up Esteban, but when there is that tension and when it boils over, I think that separates a great sports person that is able to vent their frustration without inflicting it on another person, and a sports person that's got a lot to learn. Okay,
but your story of the week, Cameron, why? Why is this significant in Formula One?
It's significant in Formula One because it's the first time it's come up in about 20 years. And obviously the attitudes towards conflict outside of the cockpit has changed massively in that time. Obviously, we've got social media now. We didn't have social media 20 years ago when Michael Schumacher hunted down David Coulthard at the 98 Belgian Grand Prix after taking each other out.
And I put it to you, we also have new owners, don't we, of Formula One, relatively so.
Yes, American owners.
American owners. So this is potentially good news for them.
Well, yeah, everyone's talking about it. Even people that aren't Formula One fans are talking about it.
With great lust and passion and desire, Jamie, I turn to you and say, what is your story of the week?
This was the week I signed off my diary, Jamie Timson, £26,500.
Here's my most recent card statement. Most frequent purchases. Food, I'm spending way too much money, but because I work downtown Brooklyn, the prices are definitely different than near my house. They're cheaper, but it's been pretty often I stopped bringing lunch, so I'm trying to start it up again. Oh my gosh, I should stop eating. I could probably spend less at Starbucks. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I like lattes and macchiatos, which is more expensive than coffee, so I could probably cut that down. I'm definitely spending too much money on Ubers, especially within like the same day, which doesn't make any sense.
That was a money tour from Glamour magazine of a career advisor from New York who makes $43,000 per year. Jamie, what's the story?
This week, my story is about the rise and continued rise of money diaries. They're supremely popular, mainly among millennials. So, as we've heard, probably you might not quite know about them. But that's the idea of this podcast, I guess. So
yes, it's all about educating me.
The idea behind a money diary, and they basically, there's been lots of imitations, but the main one was started by Refinery 29, which is a website for women, young millennial women, really. And the idea is that they tell how much it is they earn, and then they make a very detailed budget for readers to see exactly what they spend their money on every week.
So for non-millennials, this is a bit like that thing in the Sunday Times, where they ask someone, what have you bought this week? What was the last book you bought? How much did your house cost?
Yes, but it's very intensely about your day-to-day budget rather than anything a bit more general. So it's actually, the idea, and a lot of the people, kind of proponents of it that are big fans of it, say that it allows millennials and all readers really to really get a handle on what people are spending their money on and how their finances are affected. Now, there was an article this week in The Guardian by Frances Ryan that was basically saying that they are inherently what she describes as out there for hate clicks, because this week there was one in Grazia, which was a woman who was some kind of consultant, and she was earning £40,000, living with her parents, so was paying a reduced rent, but said that at the end of each month she was still having to borrow money from her parents. Now, this went viral. I mean, I think sadly for her, she probably it had her picture on it as well, and people were just like, what are you spending your money on? How have you ended up earning 40 grand and you still are needing to borrow it?
Which, to be fair, was the point of the article. Like, she was actually saying it's ridiculous that I'm in this situation where I can't afford to live. I mean, I read the article. I thought it was quite a fair-minded, honest appraisal of her own financial situation. She was saying, I know this is ridiculous. I'm in my 30s living with my parents on a good salary, but I can't afford everything I need.
And I think, people would say that the money diaries are a way of helping her. If she can see how people are spending their money, what their outgoings are going on, then perhaps, hopefully, we can get to a stage where people are able to deal with. Because, let's be clear, we don't get taught how to manage our money at school. That's just not a thing that happens.
Let's talk about that, Felicity, from the Week Junior. Should children be taught more about financial management so that as adults they don't have to turn to perv on other people's spending spree?
Yeah, of course. That is obviously a huge part of this. But I think the bigger issue is just the very gendered component about money diaries. I mean, this is about women, Jamie. All these money diaries are women talking about their finances. This isn't about millennials in general. And I think the Grazia article is really interesting because in some ways, the reason it's gone viral is it's because it's a woman who clearly isn't handling her money properly. And for me, that seems to reinforce really negative stereotypes about women being vapid and not being able to look after the money. So actually it's frustrating that this has gained so much attention, because I think everyone's just rolling their eyes at women and saying, another woman who can't handle their finances. And I think the problem is that the conversation when it comes to money, the narrative has always been about men, and now you're seeing women opening up about their stories. And in some ways that's really helpful, because I think women being able to come together and have a community where they can talk about their relationship to money in a way that they have a different relationship to money than men do is really, really helpful. But on the other hand, I don't like the idea that this Grazia article has gone viral, because she's not representative of how women handle their finances at all. And I find it quite offensive that...
I think that's the idea of these money diaries in general, really, because a lot of them are millennial women, and I don't think any of them really represent... Well, I can't speak for women, but I can speak for millennials, that they don't represent the millennial at all. Perhaps they do, but I mean, I'm in a similar situation of where I live at home and I'm trying to save money, and I'm on considerably less than this lady, and I'm still able to bank. I'm able to bank without borrowing from my parents.
I think there are two points which I think that inherently they obviously are sexist in terms of what they are, particularly these ones. But the Refinery 29 ones, there are lots of ones of people spending money. They have less of a clickbaity headline. They are less about people not spending their money correctly, but actually are about, if you go through them, there's lots of people from lots of different walks of life. And I think from what they are, the way they're describing them is that they are basically trying to take the talking about money away from the male-dominated arena and towards more women, like you said, being more open about it. I just think, to add to your point, there was a recent survey that was saying among millennials, 63% of women felt that they didn't have the correct help and support when it came to managing their money, in comparison to just 33% of men. So clearly there is a divide in between what is aimed at men and what is aimed at women, and why that is.
But the impulse of people to look at this stuff, it's not just about the financial diaries, is it? Because it's also about these, I don't know what you'd call them, kind of routine diaries, where people say, I get up at 4 a.m. and I do yoga and Pilates, and then I...
Yeah, the Mark Wahlberg one is worth anyone checking out online. because he gets up at 2 and prays, and then for half an hour, but then only spends 10 minutes with his children throughout the rest of the day.
So there you go. Okay, well, so there's an example where it's not a woman, but he was ridiculed, for sharing his details. But there's still an audience for that. So it's not just about sort of pointing at people and saying how do they spend their money. It is, to return to your theory about the last story, Felicity, maybe it is just human instinct. We're interested in what other people are doing, and particularly in this very pressurised world where we're worried about our own productivity, more and more people working from home and juggling careers. They're just thinking, what can I learn from someone else? What's wrong with that?
I think it is true that we are very interested in these kind of diarised articles. I get up at 6 o'clock, I make myself a green smoothie and I go for a run and then I meditate.
It's never a fried breakfast and then I watch this morning, is it?
It's never a fried egg. And I mean, I would never be able to do one of those. It would just be so not like that. But I mean, I think we are fascinated, and the way other people spend their money, I think, is something that has, long been a source of fascination for people. But I think in this instance, when Refinery 29, the problem is, I think, the huge amounts of judgment going on and the attacks on these anonymous women is just like incredible. In the comment section. There's I would like to think idealistically that this is women coming together talking about their own sort of very gendered issues with money, but it's just Schadenfreude on every level, that you're seeing women really be quite nasty and kind of take this weird kind of glee and pleasure out of attacking women. Whatever they do, it's wrong.
Well, I think that's what a lot of these articles are doing. It's that kind of, people are interested, it's that voyeurism of knowing what's going on in someone else's life, and it's that they're almost trying to read it so that they can make themselves feel better about what they do. I think it's almost like a self-gratification in that sense. Okay,
but Cameron, I want to pick you up on what you said about how you're in a similar situation, but you are able to bank properly.
Yes.
So if there are all these people sharing their money diaries who are relying on their parents, whatever gender they are, why is that happening? Who's to blame for that situation? Why are they not very good at looking after their finances? Is that a generational thing? Is it because people aren't educated? Are the parents to blame? What's the reason?
Well, I come from a family of savers. We really are kind of, if you don't need it, don't buy it. So it could be your upbringing as well. But at the end of the day, I think that maybe it is a gender thing of where women have to buy more things on a daily basis than men do. I mean, what do I buy frequently? A sandwich.
But there's huge intergenerational poverty as well. The real issue is that, like, now in this day and age, we are, as a generation, far poorer relatively than any generation that's happened. I mean, I think the inequality levels are since the 1960s and 70s. And couple that with a lack of people wanting to talk about how much they earn, which has been a thing that it has existed in this country for a long time. And we've ended up in a situation where, and it generally does happen that men get paid more than women, but we end up in a situation where people aren't talking about how much they earn and aren't telling people. And so we're just getting poorer and poorer as a group because we're not challenging the people that are in charge of our wages.
And I think what is interesting about the woman who wrote for Grazia, even though she did have a huge lack of self-awareness about her privilege, she did point out that her father was able to buy a house when he was age 21. And I think a lot of the millennial generation can relate to that. Parents who didn't have huge savings and who didn't have incredible jobs were able to buy house, get on the housing ladder in their early 20s, which for now is just out of reach of so many people.
But I think that, this opening up of money and how much people spend and what it is a sign of hopefully what the next 10 years will be like, which is that people are more willing to talk about how much they earn and they do challenge the kind of status quo about it, but hopefully in a better way than is going on at the moment, which is people just bitching about how much and where someone spends their cash.
Yeah, because I think it's a real step forward that people are coming up and talking about their income, but I still am very uncomfortable of telling people what I earn.
Well, if you want to...
Are you going to tell us what you earn?
No. Well, if you want to find out how much I earn, speak to my agent and just assume he's added 50%. That is it from this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to Cameron Tait, Jamie Timson and Felicity Capon, who I assume is actually paid the most out of all of us. Never miss an episode when you subscribe to this podcast. Just search for The Week Unwrapped on your app of choice and hit subscribe. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby. The producer, Chica Ayres at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.